Welcome to the homestead. Little Shooter says that I'm taking this homesteading business a little too far. She says it's changing me. I don't know what she's talking about. So I hem-hawed around about whether or not to make a video on this topic, but I decided to go ahead and make a video because gardening is part of survival. It may not be necessarily camping related, but it's part of self-reliance. And so you're going to see a few homesteading and probably a few more homesteading type videos in the In the Bush series, because you could definitely homestead out somewhere in the bush and clear a spot where you build your cabin and you're going to put it in a garden and maybe raise some livestock or, raise your own food. So we're going to talk about growing your own food today. I picked a severe drought year to grow my first real garden. This is the first year I've grew anything of any significance. And so I'm just going to show you around the garden. It's going to be quick, simple, and to the point. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about my first real garden. Now I have some photos somewhere of when I first planted everything this spring, and if I can find them, I'll put them here. Here's the potatoes at the old pond, at the cabin. And these tomatoes look even better than the ones at the house. They're doing really good. That plant's looking really healthy. And down here I've planted squash, zucchini. There's a zucchini plant that I started. It's already going pretty good. Peppers, we'll see if they amount to anything. Zucchini, I believe. More peppers, I don't know if they'll do anything. More peppers. And then, yesterday, I planted okra in these little holes. This isn't really going to be a how-to video. This is going to be more of just showing you my first go at gardening, and I've already learned a ton, let me tell you. Behind me, we have some tomatoes. I've got 8 tomato plants here on this hillside. And what my plan was to do was utilize the space between my house and my garage. We're standing on my patio right now. And I wanted to utilize the space between the house and the garage because it's hard to mow. It's a hillside. It's hard to mow. It's hard to take care of. And I was hoping that its proximity close to the house would keep the varmints from eating my produce. So I did. I planted 8 tomatoes in the clay here. This is terrible soil. There's literally no topsoil. It's just clay. And I got lazy and I didn't dig a very big hole for them to take root. But guess what? They took root. Now, I had started some seedlings. They didn't make it. These were tomatoes that I went and bought in the pots. They were like 35 cents a plant. They come 4 in a little container. And I got several different varieties. I've got cherry, I've got beefsteak, I've got Romas, and I wanted a lot of different varieties because there's different things you use them for, like Romas for making sauce and different things. So I planted tomatoes in the clay here, and they've done surprisingly well. Now, they're not big plants. Like this one here is a fairly small plant, but it's been producing tomatoes all summer. It's now August. It's the end of August. It's August 28th. And these plants are loaded with tomatoes, and they've been producing me a steady supply of tomatoes all year. The ground is not ideal here. The sunlight is not ideal here. It's shady big portion of the day, but it works. Tomatoes are easy to grow. So don't be scared to try it. Don't be scared to try it because what do you have to lose? 35 cents? Stinking wasps. Here up against the garage, I planted 3 tomato plants, and they're doing okay, but they don't get enough sun, so I won't do that again. I planted some kale here, and I had a lot of lettuce this spring here. And what I did was I let my lettuce go to seed. And now I've planted the seeds, from this lettuce, and I'm going to harvest all the seeds from that lettuce and collect them. That's something you do as a survivalist. And but what I did was I planted a couple rows of lettuce in between each tomato plant. It's called companion gardening, where I'm planting the two together. The shade from the tomatoes kind of helps out the lettuce, and the lettuce keeps the weeds down in between the tomatoes. So it works. So I've got my fall lettuce coming up now. I'll show you that. You can see the rows starting. So what I'm doing is I'm going to try a different style of growing it, where instead of thinning it down, I'm going to let it grow really compact together like that. And it keeps it from growing up into a big stalk like that one there. Right here I have potatoes. I have Pontiac Red and Cannaback potatoes. And what I did was I simply dug a trench in the clay. I dug 3 trenches in the clay, and then I put my potatoes in, and then I covered those trenches with grass clippings as I mowed the yard during the spring. And the grass clippings did not burn the potatoes. They actually worked out perfectly. So underneath all those grass clippings, there should be a copious amount of potatoes waiting to be dug up here real soon. My plants are still mostly green, so I'm not going to dig them yet. I've dug a little bit of like this first row, and I'm digging kind of the ones that die out first. But until my plants are the majority dead, I will keep letting them grow. So here behind the garage, I utilize this space to plant some pepper plants. And we've got a ghost pepper plant here, which is loaded with peppers. The problem is they're so hot, I don't even know what I'm going to do with them. And then we've got some bell peppers and some sweet peppers. They're putting out peppers, but I definitely know what I'm going to do differently next year. I think they need a little more sun and a little better soil. I've got another 3 tomato plants back here behind the garage. They seem to be doing okay, but they haven't been high producers. Down here by the corner of the roadway, we have several different types of squash: spaghetti squash, yellow crookneck, and regular zucchini. There are several reasons why my zucchini plants are so small. The main reason being the soil is poor, it's mostly clay. It's just all I had to work with. I didn't have a source of good topsoil this year, and I wasn't about to go buy it. So I just planted my stuff in the clay, and it is what it is. But the second reason they're not doing well is it's a drought year. I water these every day, but it's still not enough. It's a drought, it's a severe drought, and they're just not getting enough water. But they are producing. I have tons of zucchinis. Right here, I have a row of okra, and it's doing really well. It's not as tall as other people's okra. Again, probably because of the soil conditions and whatnot. But it's doing great. It's producing tons of okra for me. This little pepper plant here is producing tons of jalapenos. And it's tiny. It's only about 1.15 inches tall, maybe. But it's always covered with jalapenos. So I let them get just a little bit bigger, and then we make jalapeno poppers. Well, let's talk about watering now. So it's a drought year. It's been quite hot and dry. We haven't had a really good rain since like June. It's the end of August now. So I water these about every day. Now, a common myth that you'll hear is to water in the morning or water in the evening. And I've done my research on that, and it does not hurt a plant by watering in the direct sunlight. I try to just water at the base anyway. Usually I water in the direct sunlight, and my plants are doing just fine. They're not the best, they're not the biggest, but they're producing fruit. So one of the things that I learned from my good buddy Cherokee Bob, big shout out to him, is he was talking about quantity kind of over quality. He has to grow somewhere around 300 tomato plants just so he has enough nice tomatoes to take to the farmer's market, because you don't want to take all your blemished tomatoes with end rot, different things, going on. You don't want to take those to the farmer's market and try to sell them. So because he's all organic and he doesn't use pesticides or any chemicals, he has to plant quite a few plants to get a lot of pretty fruit to, take to the market. So the thing I learned from that is, instead of having 4 or 5 tomato plants and pruning them like crazy and like making sure I got the pH of the soil and everything just perfect, instead of doing that, I just decided I'd grow like 20 tomato plants. And the same goes for zucchini. Instead of having 2 or 3 zucchini plants that are really healthy, I have like 20 zucchini plants. And I'm getting tons and tons of fruit with really less effort. So seedlings are pretty easy to start. Here's a cool little trick for y'all. Place a stake at the root of your squash plant, then you'll know where to water, because they vine along the ground and sometimes you can't remember where they actually come out at. So if you water near the stake, you'll be sure that your squash plants are getting some water in their roots. Next year I'm going with raised beds, and I'm going to get some manure from my cousin who does Winky's beef. If you live in the area, make sure you get some Winky's beef. And I'm going to build raised beds out of leftover tin. So I'll do a whole episode on that. Now, for some reason, I thought it would be cool to plant some tomatoes back at my cabin. It is kind of cool, but they require water too during a drought. So I've got these 2 30-gallon kettles that I use for home brewing. As many of you know, I make my own beer, and I worked for a brewery for a short period of time, and I'm also a founding member of Big Dam Brewers local homebrew club. And so long story short, I got these kettles, and they actually work perfect for carrying enough water back to water my tomatoes back there. I can get about 40 gallons of water back there at a time. Gotta drive slow so I don't splash the water out of the kettles. I don't have any lids for them. My plants here at the cabin are bigger than my plants at the house. They like the soil better, but unfortunately they don't get the care that the plants at the house do. So they're not as healthy, and they actually don't produce quite as much. The plants at the house, I pass by them on my sidewalk literally every day. As soon as I step out my door, they're right there. So the plants at the house automatically get better treatment. I did a little more pruning on the ones at the house. I trimmed the suckers, which some people who grow tomatoes know what that's all about. These ones back here are not pruned. They're not really taken care of at all. The only thing I do is water them and pick them. And another reason why these ones are not doing as well is simply because the deer come up and eat them off. Whereas at the house, I'm around and the deer don't come up as much. So one trick that I'm trying to get rid of deer is I cleaned out my hairbrush here at the cabin, and I cleaned out my hair sheddings from it, and I'm going to just attach that here to tomatoes, and that will help hopefully dissuade any deer, and they come up and they smell that. They'll probably get used to it though. They've really destroyed these plants here. You can see where they're eating them off pretty badly. Whenever you find those, and tomato worms will do that too, but I've found that it's deer, not tomato worms, that are causing the majority of my problems. My plan next year is to put things back here. Like, I'd like to grow some asparagus back here. I'd like to try strawberries. I'd like to try blackberries. I'd like to replant some of the wild raspberries. And I would like to grow more of the stuff that you don't really have to tend to, except for just minor things. I'd rather grow that kind of stuff back here at the cabin, and the stuff that I really have to tend to, I could do at the house. Well, the chores are done, so you know what that means. It's step 2 time. Ooh, that's refreshing. I started getting my first tomatoes and zucchinis the last weekend in June, so I did really well. I've been eating out of the garden pretty hot and heavy ever since then. I'm still getting used to the extra fiber in my diet, I'll just put it that way. There was one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is the way I'm dressed. I'm kind of being silly, obviously, but I don't mean this as poking fun or making fun of any culture. Because I know somebody's going to get in the comment and they're going to say, "You're making fun of the Amish, blah, 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 blah." No, I'm not. I really, really respect the Amish quite a lot. And this whole thing started because I grow my facial hair under my face. It doesn't grow on the front. And I only grow a thin mustache, so I shaved off anyway. And when I went to the racetrack and performed there, somebody put this hat on my head. And ever since then, we kind of laughed because of the way it makes me look, obviously. And so, but there's also a guy that I watch on YouTube called, there's 2 of them, Off Grid with Doug and Stacy. And he dresses like an Amish man, although he is not Amish. He decided that he was tired of synthetic fibers and he wanted to go all cotton, all natural, cotton, wool, that kind of stuff. And so he simply went down the road after they bought their homestead. He simply went down the road and he found a local Amish farm, and he asked them if they could sew up some clothes for him and if they would be insulted by it. And they said no. I'll try to put a link to that video up here or in the description, because he actually explains why he dresses the way he does. And there are a lot of advantages to the way they dress. It's not just all for culture or religious purposes. There's actual, real good reasons behind it. The hat, for example, the hat keeps the sun off of your face and your neck so you don't get all sunburned. The shirts are cotton and they're white during the summer typically. And so that allows them to wick the sweat. And if there's any breeze, that wet front of your shirt will help cool you off. Cotton is great. That's why I wear t-shirts all the time. And during the summer, like lighter colored t-shirts are great. They wear suspenders. They don't wear belts because belt buckles can be flashy. But what I'm finding with the suspenders is I can bend over without showing any crack. And I think everybody is thankful for that. So I'm not saying that I want to dress like this all the time or whatever, but there's good reasoning to maybe dress this way. And I wouldn't mind, I'd like to lose some weight first and be a little smaller, but I wouldn't mind seeing if my local Amish that sew up clothes and stuff, I wouldn't mind seeing if they could make me a few shirts and maybe a couple pairs of jeans. And they use denim for their pants and stuff. And I wouldn't be opposed to wearing that around the homestead. I'm not saying I would wear it to town and everywhere like Doug from Doug and Stacy. He wears it everywhere. He's all in. He's all in. But anyhow, it's not meant insulting at all. It's meant as more of an honor. I couldn't personally do their religion, and I like my air conditioning, and I like my electricity, and I like being able to drive and stuff. But I don't want to limit myself to that extent. But I can see the reasoning for the way they dress and the way they do things. There's a lot to it, and they're not stupid. So anyway, I'm going to sit back, enjoy this step 2, and then here after a bit, we'll go inside, and I got to show some cooking because I do that in every video. So we're going to cook up something from the garden. It won't be over a fire tonight, but this is kind of not a non-traditional episode of In the Bush anyway. Tonight, my entire dinner, actually today, all the food that I'm putting into my body is 100% off the land, self-sustained. In here we've got some zucchini, squash, and some Yukon Gold potatoes that I grew back at the cabin. And we're going to throw in some onion tops, some kale, some tomatoes, and then we're going to top it off with some farm fresh eggs from my brother's chickens. So today I'm eating 100% sustainable. I'm also going to have a salad with my lettuce. I've got this prize head lettuce and it's been staying, it doesn't get bitter during the summer. So going to be eating 100% off the land. How cool is that? It's the healthiest way you could possibly eat. The closer you can be to your food, the better. Added a little kale. I'm going to let that cook down for a little bit. I'm actually going to turn it down just a notch so it don't scorch on the bottom. I like to get everything nice and soft. Ooh, what a fresh, you can't get any fresher than this. Everything here was picked today. The potatoes were dug today. Kale, I just walked outside and picked it and brought it in, washed it and threw it in. The zucchini was picked today. Everything, the tomatoes was picked today, were picked today. Everything. So, how cool is that? My goal is to get to where I eat like this all the time. You know, a person eats like this, they have to be healthy. From my brother's chickens. How awesome is this? All 100% local and farm raised. Oh, look at that. This cannot suck. Oh, I'm so excited to tear into that. Well, here we go. Oh, yeah. I still wanted the yolks to be runny. That's what I got. Well, let me tell you what. This doesn't suck. So I know we're not out in the bush right now. We're in my house. But I thought that gardening would be a really cool thing to show on an episode of In the Bush. Because the series is all about, you know, the sustainable lifestyle.